The bustling Christmas market glowed with festivity, its vibrant lights spilling over the city square in streaks of red, green, and gold. Families wandered from stall to stall, their laughter mingling with the melodies of holiday music that floated on the crisp December air. The scent of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon hung thick, inviting shoppers to lose themselves in the celebration. Officer Mark Daniels observed the scene with a detached focus. Tall and built from years of duty, he stood just outside the crowd, his hand resting on the belt loop of his uniform. On any other day, the joyful hum of voices might have brought him comfort, but not tonight. Not in this city square, where 1 year ago, he had failed to save a little girl from being taken. The case had haunted him since, a bitter reminder of the stakes of his job and the faces he'd never forget. As he scanned the throngs of people, his gaze lingered on families, young children running ahead of their parents, faces alight with the wonder of Christmas. His fingers tensed. This market was supposed to be a safe place, but even here, he knew dangers could lurk. Just as he finished his scan, a small figure darted from a cluster of people near a toy stall. A girl no older than 10, with wide eyes and curly dark hair framing her face, was making a beeline for him. Her clothes were slightly oversized, as if she dressed hurriedly, and she clutched a small stuffed bear under one arm. "Officer," she called softly, her voice barely carrying over the crowd's din. Mark crouched to her level, a gentle smile softening his face. "Yes. Can I help you?" The girl hesitated, glancing over her shoulder before whispering, "There's something strange. The man in the red suit over there. He's been watching me." Mark's smile faded, his gaze following the direction she pointed. Through the gaps between heads in the crowd, he spotted him, a man in a Santa suit, standing just beyond the main walkway. Nothing seemed overly odd at first, but then he caught the way the man's eyes drifted toward the girl, an unsettling hint of recognition. His muscles tightened, but he kept his tone calm. "What's your name?" "Mira," she whispered, hugging the bear tighter. "Stay with me, Mira," he murmured, his attention back on the man in red. "We're just going to check on him." He tapped his radio, signaling to dispatch to send another unit, though he didn't dare let his concern show on his face. Christmas was a time for joy, not for panic. But as his gaze met Mira's again, he knew he had to tread carefully, both for her sake and the crowd's. As Officer Mark Daniels led Mira closer to Santa, he sensed her unease growing. She walked quietly beside him, her small hand gripping the back of his jacket, eyes darting toward the jolly red figure as if any sudden movement might send her running. He drew Mira aside as they neared a bustling stall, positioning her out of the man's sight line. She waited as he moved forward, slipping carefully between the stalls, his eyes never leaving Santa's figure. Daniels got close enough to catch a clearer view. The man's beard was snowy white, but his eyes were hidden beneath the low brim of his Santa hat. For a moment, the figure almost seemed innocent, just another volunteer handing out candy canes and cheer. But something was off. The man kept glancing over his shoulder, and Daniels spotted the faintest hint of agitation in his posture. Just as Daniels was about to approach, Santa's gaze flickered up and locked onto him. The man's face twisted for a split second, just long enough to betray a spark of recognition. That was all Daniels needed. He stepped forward, his voice steady yet commanding. "Evening. How's the night treating you, Santa?" The man's mouth curled in what should have been a friendly grin, but Daniels could see the tension behind it. "Good evening, officer. Just spreading a little holiday cheer." Daniels nodded, but his expression remained firm. "Good to hear. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" The man hesitated, his grip tightening on the burlap sack slung over his shoulder. Before he could respond, Mira crept closer, staring at him with wide eyes. Daniels caught her movement, sensing her curiosity mixed with a tinge of fear. Santa's gaze shifted, landing on Mira. His expression softened, his lips twitching as though he was about to say something. But just then, Daniels saw a glint, a sharp, calculating look that made his stomach turn. It was the same look he'd seen in the eyes of the perpetrator from last year. Daniels didn't wait. He raised his hand to his radio, calling for backup with an urgency that hadn't left his voice since he took this post a year ago. Dispatch, this is Daniels at the market. I need backup. Possible situation developing at my location. Santa's face paled slightly, and he backed up, his hand subtly reaching toward his belt. Daniels' pulse spiked. The situation was quickly slipping towards something dangerous, but he had to keep calm. Sir, I'm going to need you to stay put, Daniels said, his tone firm, edging into command. But before he could step in further, Santa moved, slipping into the crowd with a surprising agility for a man his age and size. Daniels gritted his teeth, his heart pounding as he looked back to Mira. She was wide-eyed, her face pale, but a strange determination settled in her expression. I saw where he went, she whispered. Daniels gave her a quick nod, signaling for her to stay close but remain behind him as he followed Santa's trail. Every instinct told him that this man was more than just a mysterious stranger in costume. He was a threat, one Daniels couldn't afford to let slip away. And as he moved through the festive lights and cheerful voices, he sensed the first hints of a darker story waiting to unfold. As Officer Daniels slipped through the bustling crowd, his mind flashed back to the little girl from last year, the one he hadn't been able to save. The memory cut into him with a familiar sting, sharper now as he watched Mira trying to keep pace beside him, her tiny steps struggling to match his urgent stride. This case was different, he told himself, though the similarities haunted him. The same time of year, the same festive lights casting their deceivingly cheerful glow over a crowd of unsuspecting holiday shoppers. The market felt like a web, each stall and decoration a distraction that could allow a predator to vanish without a trace. He looked down at Mira, who clung to his jacket, her small face taut with concentration. She was brave, he had to admit. Most kids her age would be too scared to even approach a stranger for help, let alone follow a police officer after spotting someone dangerous. But Mira was different. There was a steadiness in her eyes, something that reminded him of the girl he had failed to save, a detail he tried not to dwell on. As they wound through the market, his radio crackled to life, signaling that backup was still delayed. Holiday traffic's got us tied up, Daniels. We'll be there as soon as we can. Daniels gritted his teeth, scanning the stalls for any sign of the man in the Santa suit. Mira tugged his sleeve again, pointing toward a row of small, decorated trees. Her voice was a whisper, filled with urgency. I think he went that way. He nodded, leading her toward the direction she pointed. The festive music seemed louder here, a tinny melody blaring from a nearby speaker. Mira stayed close, her eyes darting around, her breath shallow. Her resolve wavered, and Daniels saw her clench her small fists as though summoning her courage. They reached the end of the row, but the Santa figure was nowhere to be found. Just as Daniels was about to backtrack, he spotted a dark, narrow alley that cut between two of the market's larger stalls. The alley was empty, save for the dim glow of a single string of Christmas lights above, casting long shadows against the brick walls. Daniels knelt beside Mira, giving her a reassuring nod. Stay here, okay? I'm just going to check this alley. Don't move from this spot. Mira nodded, her fingers clutching her stuffed bear. Be careful. Daniels moved silently into the alley, his hand ready on his belt. The sounds of the market faded as he stepped into the shadows. Each step he took echoed slightly, the narrow walls amplifying even the smallest sound. He reached the alley's end and found only darkness, no sign of the man. But just as he was about to turn back, he caught sight of something in the corner, a small piece of paper fluttering near a garbage bin. He bent down, picking up the note. The handwriting was hurried, scrawled with a shaky hand. It was a simple message, but the words sent a chill through him. The gift is under the tree. Daniels' pulse quickened. He pocketed the note and moved back to Mira, his mind racing. Whatever was happening here, it was more than a case of an innocent Santa impersonator. This was a setup, a carefully placed trap, hidden in the guise of holiday cheer. He took Myra's hand, keeping his tone calm as he spoke. Let's get back to the main area. I have a feeling we're about to find something important. Leading Mira back through the market, Daniel's mind reeled as he processed the note's ominous message. The gift is under the tree. It could mean anything, but his gut told him it pointed to something dangerous. Something planted at the heart of the Christmas celebration. The towering Christmas tree stood at the center of the square, decked out in lights and ornaments that sparkled in the night. A crowd had gathered around, families waiting for the lighting ceremony, which was due to start in less than an hour. Daniels felt his heart race. Whatever the gift was, it was likely hiding among the decorations on or around the tree. He steered Mira toward a less crowded spot, away from the tree. She seemed to sense his concern, clutching her bear even tighter. "Is everything okay, Officer Daniels?" He forced a reassuring smile, though his gaze kept returning to the massive tree and the people gathered around it. "It will be, Mira. I just need to make sure that tree is safe." She nodded, her expression determined. "I can help." Her words surprised him. Most kids would have backed away, but Myra's courage reminded him of why he'd become a police officer in the first place. He gave her a quick nod, grateful for her trust and her bravery. His radio crackled to life again. "Daniels, this is Sergeant Williams. Backup's finally here. Where are you?" Daniels pressed the radio button, glancing over at Mira before responding. "I'm by the main square, near the tree. We may have a situation. Look for anyone acting suspicious near the Christmas tree and be prepared for an evacuation." He guided Mira to a spot where she could see the crowd, but stay hidden. He couldn't afford to have her near the tree if anything went wrong. As he scanned the crowd, he caught a flash of red near the base of the tree, a glimpse of the familiar Santa figure slipping through the crowd with surprising speed. Daniels broke into a quiet sprint, weaving his way between shoppers and holiday revelers. The man moved fast, darting between people and using the crowd to his advantage. For every step Daniels gained, Santa seemed to pull away just a little more. Finally, the crowd thinned, and Daniels found himself in the open square, the man in the Santa suit directly in front of him. He was close enough now to catch the faint sound of his voice, murmuring as though talking to himself, or perhaps into a concealed radio. "Sir," Daniels called out, his voice firm. "Stop where you are." Santa froze, glancing back with that same unsettling glint in his eyes. He hesitated for a moment before turning slowly, his face calm, but his eyes cold. "Officer, is something the matter?" Daniels steadied his breath. "We need to have a word. Could you come with me?" The man's gaze flickered, his mouth twisting in a subtle smirk. "Of course, officer. Anything for the holiday spirit." But just as Daniels reached out to lead him away, the man bolted, slipping back into the crowd with shocking agility. Daniels cursed under his breath, fighting to keep his focus as he plunged back into the throng of people. He was losing time, and with every step, he felt the stakes rising. As the crowd closed in around him, Myra's face flashed in his mind. He couldn't let her or anyone else down. Not tonight. And as he pressed forward, the weight of last year's failure pushed him to move faster, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. The Christmas lights sparkled above as Daniels pushed through the crowd, eyes fixed on the figure in red slipping through the sea of shoppers. With every step, the market buzzed louder, a crescendo of voices and laughter mingling with the holiday music, making it hard to focus on anything else. The crowd seemed to grow thicker, closing in like a tide, but Daniels' determination propelled him forward. Just as he began to lose sight of Santa, a flash of movement caught his eye, the figure in red darting into a narrow alley between two stalls. Daniels' pulse quickened as he altered course, diving into the alley in pursuit. The space was cramped, illuminated only by the stray lights from the market, casting long shadows over the stone walls. Santa's figure loomed ahead, only a few yards away. "Stop right there," Daniel shouted, his voice echoing off the alley walls. Santa halted, his shoulders tense, before slowly turning to face Daniels. His expression was cold, unbothered, as though he had anticipated this encounter. In the dim light, Daniels could make out more details: a wiry build, hands hidden in the pockets of his red coat, and a smile that sent a chill down Daniels' spine. "What seems to be the problem, officer?" the man asked, his voice smooth and detached, as though they were simply discussing holiday plans. Danielle's grip tightened, fingers brushing the radio clipped to his shoulder. "I need you to come with me for questioning. There have been reports of suspicious behavior, and we can't afford to take risks here tonight." Santa raised an eyebrow, his mouth curling into a smug grin. "Suspicious behavior? I'm just here to spread holiday cheer. Isn't that what everyone expects from Santa?" Something about the man's tone stirred a sense of unease in Daniels. This wasn't a simple troublemaker or a festive prankster. There was a layer of calculation in his gaze, an unsettling calmness that seemed to radiate from him. "Let's go," Daniels insisted, stepping closer, his hand hovering near his belt. But Santa only shrugged, taking a single step back as he did. "You don't understand, officer. I'm exactly where I need to be tonight. This market, these people." He waved a gloved hand toward the distant lights of the square. "They're all part of the plan." Daniel's heart pounded as he processed the man's words. He reached for his radio, signaling for immediate backup. "This is Officer Daniels, requesting immediate assistance in the south alley of the market. Possible suspect is uncooperative and may pose a threat to public safety." The man's face paled slightly, his eyes narrowing as he watched Daniels speak into the radio. The tension between them hung heavy in the cold night air. "Well," the man said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper, "I suppose it's time to give you a little gift, officer." Before Daniels could react, the man turned on his heel and sprinted down the alley, his footsteps echoing against the stone walls. Daniels took off after him, his boots pounding the cobblestones as he gained on the fleeing figure. The alley opened up into a small courtyard, the twinkling lights of the market casting a surreal glow over the empty space. But by the time Daniels entered, the man in the Santa suit was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, Daniels scanned the empty courtyard, searching for any sign of the man's escape. But the Santa suit-clad figure had vanished, leaving only a faint echo of footsteps fading into the night. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. How had he managed to slip away so easily? The radio crackled, and his partner's voice broke through. "Daniels, this is Sergeant Williams. We've got units surrounding the perimeter, but no one's spotted your suspect. What's the status on your end?" Daniel's jaw tightened as he pressed the radio to his lips. "He slipped past me. We're dealing with a highly skilled suspect. He's not just a troublemaker. He's calculated, and he's here for a reason. Keep all units on high alert." He moved back toward the main square, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the man's motives. His words had been cryptic, but they hinted at something planned, something designed to shake the holiday market and everyone within it. Daniel's grip on his radio tightened, his gaze sweeping over the festive scene with renewed suspicion. As he reached the edge of the square, he spotted Mira, her eyes scanning the crowd as though searching for him. When she caught sight of him, her face lit up, and she hurried over. "Did you find him?" she asked, clutching her bear close to her chest, worry and curiosity mingling in her gaze. Daniel shook his head, keeping his voice calm. "Not yet, but I need you to stay close and keep your eyes open, all right? He's good at hiding, and he knows this market well." Mira nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. "I'll help. I can be quiet, like you." He managed a brief smile, touched by her bravery. The bond between them was growing stronger, and though he knew he had to protect her, he also recognized her ability to stay calm under pressure. Mira seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness toward her. As they made their way toward the Christmas tree, a low hum filled the air, the crowd preparing for the lighting ceremony that would soon begin. Daniel's unease deepened. The suspect's mention of a gift hadn't left his mind, and with so many people gathered in one place, any disruption could be catastrophic. The lighting ceremony was about to start. Daniels scanned the crowd, his eyes narrowing as he watched for any suspicious movements. But the crowd seemed unaware, lost in the anticipation of the festive moment. Then, just as the countdown began, Mira tugged on his sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. Look, over there. She pointed to the edge of the square, where a shadowy figure lingered, watching the crowd with an unsettling stillness. Daniel squinted, his heart hammering as he recognized the man in the Santa suit, hidden in the shadows. The man's gaze was fixed on the tree, his hand moving subtly as if activating something. Without hesitation, Daniels gripped his radio, his voice sharp. "All units, we have a possible device near the Christmas tree. Requesting immediate support for crowd evacuation." The atmosphere shifted as his voice cut through the holiday cheer, and his call to action had an instant effect. Nearby officers began moving people back, urging them away from the tree with calm but firm instructions. Daniels moved quickly, guiding Mira out of the immediate area and into a safer spot, his eyes never leaving the man in the shadows. But as the crowd cleared, the man's gaze met his, and a chilling smile spread across his face. Daniel's blood ran cold. This man had come prepared, and he wasn't afraid of being caught. The crowd was dispersing, but there were still too many people around to make an easy escape. Daniels focused on controlling the situation, keeping his voice calm and commanding as he coordinated with his fellow officers. But even as the square emptied, the man remained rooted in place, his sinister smile unwavering. Daniels took a deep breath, determination flooding him as he signaled for backup. This was no ordinary suspect. This was someone who thrived on fear, someone willing to use the holiday celebration to create chaos. And Daniels knew he couldn't let him win. The Christmas market had been partially cleared, but the crowd's restless energy lingered, an undercurrent of unease spreading through the square. Families shuffled together, casting wary glances at the Christmas tree where officers were inspecting the area. Daniels kept a firm eye on the scene, his attention split between the dispersing crowd and Mira, who stood beside him, clenching her bear with both hands. Just then, Mira tugged on his sleeve again, her voice a whisper. "Officer Daniels, I found this near the tree." In her small hand, she held a crumpled piece of paper. Daniel's brow furrowed as he took it from her, unfolding the page with care. Scrawled in hurried handwriting was another note, this one even more chilling than the first. "Countdown to joy's end, 3 gifts before dawn." A shiver ran through Daniels. He glanced down at Mira, who watched him with a quiet intensity that belied her age. She had seen the same message, and he could tell from her expression that she understood its threat, at least in part. The words suggested a sequence, and the implications hit Daniels like a blow. Whatever the man was planning, he intended it to be drawn out, targeting different parts of the market over the course of the night. Daniels pressed his radio. "All units, be advised. Suspect may be planting multiple devices throughout the market. I need full perimeter checks at all exits and an immediate search of any unattended packages near high-traffic areas." He took a deep breath, his mind racing as he formulated his next steps. The crowd's dispersal had slowed, with clusters of people lingering, unwilling to leave the festive atmosphere despite the threat. This reluctance made his task even harder. The market was like a living maze, with potential hiding spots everywhere. Mira, sensing his frustration, stepped closer. "Is there something I can do to help?" Daniels managed a reassuring smile, touched by her bravery. "Just stay close, all right? And keep your eyes open. Anything unusual, you let me know." Together, they continued through the thinning crowd, Daniel's gaze flicking from stall to stall as he scanned for any suspicious packages or signs of tampering. But nothing stood out. The market hummed with its usual cheer, though the joy was tainted by a creeping sense of dread that Daniels couldn't shake. As they passed a brightly lit stall selling ornaments, Mira stopped abruptly, staring at something on the ground. "Look," she whispered, pointing. "It's another one." Daniels followed her gaze to a small, innocuous gift box tied with a red ribbon. But it wasn't the kind sold by any of the vendors. It had an official seal stamped on it, one that made his heart lurch. This was a planted package. His instincts kicked in. He waved at the nearby officers, calling out, "Clear this area. Possible device located. I repeat, clear this area." The officers responded quickly, guiding people out of the vicinity as Daniels approached the box with caution. Mira stayed close, watching him with a mix of awe and concern as he signaled for the bomb squad. The situation was escalating, and the suspect's plans were coming to fruition faster than he'd anticipated. Daniel stepped back, keeping a protective arm in front of Mira as the bomb squad moved in. He knew he had to stay calm for her sake, but his mind raced with questions. Why here? In this market? And what did the suspect mean by 3 gifts? As the bomb squad carefully examined the package, Daniel's gaze shifted to the rest of the market. The note's ominous wording echoed in his mind. 3 gifts before dawn. If the suspect was following a planned sequence, that meant 2 more devices, likely hidden in places where the market crowd would gather. The square was quiet now, the officers working to keep order amid the anxious crowd. Daniel's radio crackled to life with an update from Sergeant Williams. Package at the tree has been neutralized, Daniels. No injuries, but I recommend we keep evacuations ongoing. Daniels exhaled, relieved. But as he glanced down at Mira, he could see the fear lingering in her eyes. He crouched to her level, his voice gentle. We're going to keep everyone safe, all right? The officers are doing everything they can. Mira nodded, clutching her bear a little tighter. Do you think he'll put the next one in a place where people go a lot, like by the food stalls? Daniels was struck by her insight. The food area was one of the busiest parts of the market, and it was exactly where he'd look if he were trying to draw maximum attention. He gave her a small nod. That's a good thought, Mira. Let's check it out. As they moved toward the food stalls, he couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for her quick thinking. She stayed close, watching everything around her with an alertness that reminded him of his own training. The food section was bustling, vendors dishing out warm treats to eager customers who hadn't heard the evacuation orders or were ignoring them. Daniel scanned the area, his eyes lingering on every bag, box, and unattended item, searching for anything that seemed out of place. Just then, his radio crackled again. All units, report of an unattended package near the main entrance to the market. Approach with caution. Daniel's pulse quickened. That made 2 of the 3. They were narrowing down the places the suspect could target. But if he was moving as quickly as they suspected, he might already have planted the final gift. Guiding Mira away from the food stalls, Daniels headed toward the market entrance, where officers were securing the area around the newly located package. Mira walked beside him in silence, her small hand clutching his sleeve for comfort. As they approached the main entrance, Daniel saw the familiar sight of another wrapped gift box, its ribbon neat and tidy, sitting innocently against the backdrop of the bustling market. The scene felt surreal, the holiday cheer clashing with the tension surrounding the gift that lay in their path. He signaled for Mira to stay back as he approached the officers. They stepped aside, allowing the bomb squad to do their work, the crowd murmuring in anxious tones as they watched from a distance. Suddenly, his radio crackled to life again with a 3rd report. Possible device near the children's play area in the southwest corner of the market. Officers are securing the perimeter. Daniel's heart sank. The 3rd gift had been found, precisely as the note had suggested. His mind raced, calculating the danger and the distance between the packages. The suspect had planned this with chilling precision, placing each device in locations that would impact different parts of the market, effectively corralling people toward the exits. He glanced over at Mira, who was watching him with a quiet resolve. She hadn't flinched or hesitated once during their search, her courage mirroring his own. He gave her a nod, silently acknowledging her bravery, then turned to his radio. This is Daniels. Evacuation order for the entire market. Clear the area immediately. We're dealing with multiple devices in high-traffic locations. The radio crackled as officers relayed his message, their voices firm as they directed the crowd to exit in an orderly manner. Shoppers and vendors alike moved toward the exits, some glancing back at the now-deserted tree, its festive lights flickering in eerie silence. But as Daniel scanned the market one last time, he felt a chill settle over him. Something was off. The 3rd device had been planted, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the suspect hadn't shown all his cards. His instincts told him there was still another twist to this game, a final move waiting in the wings. Myra's hand slipped into his, her small fingers a steadying force in the midst of chaos. "Do you think we got them all?" she whispered, her gaze fixed on his face. Daniels met her eyes, his own resolve hardening. "I think we've got most of them, but I need to make sure there's nothing else." She nodded, her expression solemn. Together, they stood at the edge of the evacuated square, watching the market as the final waves of people made their way out. Danielle's heart pounded with the certainty that this was far from over. The suspect was still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Christmas market lay empty now, a hollowed shell of its former cheer. The remaining officers combed through the stalls, ensuring every corner was cleared. The 3 gifts had been neutralized, yet Daniels couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Mira stood quietly beside him, her eyes drifting to the empty children's play area at the southwest corner. The normally bustling spot now lay still, the faint glow of the market's lights casting long shadows over the abandoned rides and booths. Danielle's radio crackled to life. "Daniels, all areas have been checked. No sign of the suspect. Markets fully cleared." A part of him felt relief, but his instincts kept tugging, urging him to dig deeper. His mind replayed the suspect's cryptic words from earlier. "I'm exactly where I need to be tonight." The phrase lingered, gnawing at him. This man hadn't just been placing random threats. There was a purpose, a plan to it all, one that Daniels feared he hadn't yet uncovered. Mira tugged at his sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think he's still here?" Daniels glanced down at her, the determination in her eyes mirroring his own. She had been calm and alert throughout the night, her instincts almost as sharp as his. "Maybe," he replied quietly. "He could be watching, waiting to see how we react. But we'll catch him. I promise." Just then, a faint movement caught his eye near the play area. A figure shifted in the shadows, barely visible against the backdrop of the market's twinkling lights. Daniel's heart rate spiked as he tightened his grip on Myra's hand. "Stay here," he whispered. "I'll be right back." He moved toward the play area with deliberate caution, his footsteps muffled by the night's quiet. The figure lingered at the edge, seemingly unaware of Daniel's approach. As he drew closer, he recognized the familiar red of the Santa suit, the unmistakable glint of the man's eyes watching the empty market. "Got you," Daniels muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively reaching for his radio. "This is Daniels. Suspect spotted near the southwest corner. Moving in for confrontation." He released the radio, edging closer, his eyes never leaving the man's figure. But just as he was within reach, the man spun around, his face twisted into a wicked grin. Daniel's breath caught. The man seemed almost delighted to see him, his expression unsettlingly calm. "Good to see you again, officer," Santa sneered, his voice dripping with false cheer. Enjoying the holiday spirit, Daniels kept his tone steady. "You're coming with me. This ends now." But Santa only laughed, his gaze flickering toward the abandoned children's rides. "Oh, officer, you really think I'd be that easy to catch? Tonight's been a game, and you've only been playing by my rules." Daniel's grip tightened. He stepped closer, determined not to let this man escape again. But as he reached for him, the suspect took a step back, disappearing into the shadows. Daniels followed, his heart pounding as he plunged into the darkness after him. The alley twisted and turned, Santa's footsteps echoing off the walls. Daniels pushed himself forward, determined to stay close. But just as he rounded a corner, the footsteps stopped. He found himself alone in the alley, with only the faintest sound of laughter drifting through the night. Daniels paused, scanning his surroundings, but the alley was empty. The suspect had vanished, melting into the darkness with a skill that left Daniels reeling. He'd been so close, close enough to see the glint in the man's eyes, to sense his twisted delight in the chase. But now he was gone, and Daniels felt the frustration gnawing at him. A soft rustle drew his attention, and he turned to find Mira standing at the alley's entrance. Her face was pale but steady, her eyes wide with a determination that echoed his own. "I saw where he went," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the night. He slipped behind one of the stalls. Daniels approached her, his gaze softening. "Mira, you've been incredibly brave tonight, but it's dangerous." "I want to help," she interrupted, clutching her bear with both hands. "He's hiding, and he's going to hurt more people if we don't stop him." Daniels hesitated, the weight of her words pressing on him. Her courage reminded him of his own resolve when he had first joined the force, and he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Mira was right. They couldn't let this man get away, and her sharp instincts had already proven invaluable. "All right," he said, nodding, "but stay close and follow my lead." She nodded, her small face set with determination, and together they moved toward the stalls. Danielle's senses were on high alert, every shadow and sound amplified in the quiet. They approached a row of small vendor booths, their lights dimmed, casting eerie shadows over the empty tables and chairs. As they rounded a corner, Mira tugged on his sleeve, pointing to a small, cluttered area behind one of the stalls. There, tucked away amid the decorations, was a large sack, partially open and filled with more packages, small, brightly wrapped boxes identical to the ones they'd found scattered across the market. Danielle's pulse quickened. This was the stash, the collection of decoys the suspect had prepared to create fear and chaos. The man had planned meticulously, intending to keep them guessing until the very end. Suddenly, a faint whisper cut through the silence, a low, mocking chuckle that made the hair on the back of Daniel's neck stand up. He turned, scanning the area, his eyes narrowing as he searched for any sign of movement. Then he saw him, lurking in the shadows just beyond the booth, his red suit blending eerily with the festive backdrop. Daniel's heart pounded as he motioned for Mira to stay back, his hand resting on his belt as he advanced. "End of the line," Daniels called out, his voice firm. The man smirked, his eyes glinting with a twisted sense of victory. "You're quite the persistent one, aren't you? But persistence won't save you, officer." Daniels didn't respond, keeping his focus sharp. He edged closer, every step deliberate, keeping his posture steady as he closed the distance. But before he could make his move, the man took a sudden step back, his arm reaching into his coat. In a flash, Mira reacted, stepping forward and throwing her bear toward him. The stuffed toy hit the man's arm, causing him to stumble just enough for Daniels to move in, grabbing his wrist and pinning him against the stall. The suspect struggled, his face contorted in anger, but Daniels held him firm, his grip unwavering. "Nice try," Daniels muttered, his voice edged with relief and satisfaction. "But you're done." The man glared at him, his breathing heavy, his calm demeanor shattered. But his gaze shifted, settling on Mira with a chilling glint of malice. "You think you've won," he sneered. "This is only the beginning." Daniels held his gaze, feeling a surge of anger rise within him. But he didn't respond, focusing on securing the man as backup arrived, officers moving in to take over. As they led the suspect away, Daniels turned to Mira, who watched him with a mix of awe and relief. "You were amazing, Mira," he said, smiling. "You helped save a lot of people tonight." She looked up at him, her face breaking into a small, proud smile. "We did it together." Daniels nodded, feeling a sense of closure settle over him. The night had been long, filled with fear and tension, but it had ended with a victory, one he owed in no small part to Mira's bravery. They watched as the officers escorted the man away, his threats echoing faintly in the air. But Daniels knew that whatever darkness had lurked in the market that night, it had been defeated, at least for now. As the officers led the suspect away, the market settled into a strange, quiet calm. The festive lights still sparkled above, but they seemed dimmed in the wake of the night's chaos. Daniels turned to Mira, who stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the scene, her face a mixture of relief and pride. Just as he started to suggest they return to her family, his radio crackled with an urgent message. "Daniels, we've just received intel. There may still be a device hidden somewhere in the market." Daniel's stomach dropped. Even with the suspect in custody, the threat hadn't entirely vanished. He exchanged a look with Mira, her eyes wide with a renewed sense of worry. "Stay close, Mira," he said, his tone firmer than before. She nodded, her small hand slipping into his as they started toward the center of the square. The Christmas tree loomed ahead, casting shadows over the now-emptied plaza. The evacuation had left the market deserted, but the silence was almost eerie. The joyous atmosphere had transformed, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that rippled through the cool night air. As they neared the tree, Daniels noticed a small group of bomb squad officers gathered around the base. He approached them, Mira at his side, her grip tightening as they drew closer to the towering structure. The officers looked up, nodding at Daniels with grim expressions. "We believe there may be something hidden within the ornaments," one of the officers explained, pointing to the decorations near the lower branches. "If he planted a device here, it's well concealed." Daniels scanned the tree, the massive ornaments glinting under the lights. It would have been easy for the suspect to hide something within the decorations, making it almost invisible in plain sight. The thought sent a chill down his spine. He knelt beside Mira, looking her in the eye. "I need you to wait here with one of the officers, all right? We'll make sure everything is safe." Mira nodded, though her gaze remained fixed on the tree, her expression intense. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniels gave her a reassuring nod before stepping forward, joining the bomb squad as they carefully searched the ornaments, their eyes scanning each detail. The minutes stretched, every shadow and glint scrutinized under the harsh light of the officers' flashlights. Just as he reached for one of the larger ornaments, a glimmer of metal caught his eye, a small, barely visible object tucked among the branches. Daniels' heart raced as he motioned to the bomb squad, pointing to the concealed device. They moved swiftly, disarming it with practiced precision, each movement careful and deliberate. The tension in Daniels' chest began to ease as the bomb squad confirmed the device had been neutralized. But as they moved to secure the area, one officer looked back at Daniels, a question lingering in his gaze. "Think he planted more?" the officer asked quietly. Daniels shook his head, uncertainty gnawing at him. "I don't know, but we'll comb every inch of this place before we call it safe." With a final nod, the officers continued their search, spreading out through the plaza, leaving Daniels and Mira standing alone by the now-empty tree. The weight of the night's events settled over him, and he felt a surge of gratitude that they had managed to prevent disaster. But a lingering worry remained. Had they truly uncovered every part of the suspect's twisted plan? With the market secured, Daniels and Mira took a moment to breathe. The tension had eased, but an unsettling feeling lingered in Daniels' mind, like the final note of a dark melody that wouldn't fade. Mira leaned against him, her small frame shivering slightly in the cold. He draped his jacket over her shoulders, giving her a reassuring smile as they watched the officers pack up their equipment. Just as he started to relax, his radio crackled with a familiar voice. "Sergeant Williams." "Daniels, we found something on the suspect. I think you'll want to see this." Daniels felt his pulse quicken. After a night like this, any additional information could be crucial. He led Mira to a nearby bench, instructing her to wait while he joined Williams near the patrol cars where the suspect sat, his hands cuffed, his eyes cold and distant. Williams held up a small device, a voice recorder, old and battered, with the faintest trace of red tape around the edges. Daniels frowned, taking the device from Williams's hand. "Where did you find this?" "It was tucked into the lining of his coat," Williams replied, his expression dark. "Looks like he's been planning this for longer than we thought." Daniels pressed play, and a static-laced recording crackled to life. The suspect's voice emerged, low and mocking, describing each part of his plan with chilling precision. As the recording continued, a pit of dread grew in Daniels' stomach. The suspect spoke of gifts he had left throughout the city, hinting that tonight's chaos was only the beginning. But was the final part of the recording that made Daniels' blood run cold. The suspect's voice softened, dripping with malice. "And to the one who thought he could stop me, tonight was just a taste. I'll be seeing you again, Officer Daniels." Daniels clenched his fists, the suspect's words twisting like a knife. This wasn't just a random act of terror. It was personal. The man had known Daniels would be here, that he would be the one to chase him down. And he'd reveled in it, orchestrating every move like a sinister symphony designed to haunt Daniels long after the night ended. Williams placed a hand on Daniels' shoulder, his expression grim. "Looks like he wanted you in particular. You have any idea why?" Daniels shook his head, though fragments of his past cases drifted through his mind. He'd encountered dangerous people, had dealt with criminals who thrived on fear and chaos. But none of them had ever made it this personal. His gaze shifted back to the suspect, who sat with a chilling calm, his face a mask of twisted satisfaction. Daniels' jaw tightened, and he approached the man, lowering his voice. "Why me? What's your endgame here?" The suspect met his gaze, his smile widening. "Oh, officer, you don't know yet, do you? This is just the prologue. You've given me quite the night of entertainment, and I intend to repay you in kind." Daniels felt a surge of anger flare within him, but he forced it down, maintaining a steady facade. "You're not going anywhere, and whatever you planned ends here." The man leaned back, a gleam of twisted joy in his eyes. "We'll see about that. You may have stopped tonight's festivities, but the season isn't over yet." Daniels straightened, stepping back as officers moved in to secure the suspect in the patrol car. But even as they drove him away, the man's words lingered, each one like a taunt that burrowed into Daniels' mind. He returned to Mira, who looked up at him with questioning eyes. "Did they find out why he did it?" she asked, her voice soft. Daniels shook his head, forcing a small smile. "Not yet, but we'll make sure he doesn't do it again." Mira nodded, seeming satisfied with his answer, though Daniels could see the shadows of the night's events lingering in her eyes. She was young, but she had seen enough to understand the gravity of what had happened. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the patrol car's taillights disappear into the distance. Daniels felt a mix of relief and unease. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the night's events hinted at something deeper, a twisted mind with unfinished plans. As they made their way back to the now deserted market, Daniels vowed to stay vigilant. He would do whatever it took to keep Mira and the rest of the city safe. But in the quiet of the empty square, with the suspect's voice echoing in his mind, he knew that the coming days might bring more than holiday cheer. The air was still heavy with tension as Daniels made his way back to the precinct the next morning, his mind replaying the suspect's ominous words over and over. The patrol car's steady hum had done little to calm him during the ride, and the suspect's twisted smirk lingered in his thoughts like an unwanted guest. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by a flurry of activity. Officers moved through the hallways, and everyone seemed on high alert. He nodded at Sergeant Williams, who waved him over to a meeting room where a small team was gathering. "Daniels," Williams began, "we've been analyzing the voice recorder and looking into any connections this guy might have with your previous cases. There's a pattern here, and it's not a good one." Daniels leaned forward, his attention sharp. "What kind of pattern?" Williams set down a series of case files on the table, each marked with his name as lead investigator. As Daniels flipped through them, he realized they all shared a disturbing similarity. Each case involved individuals with a vendetta against law enforcement, specifically against officers who had thwarted their plans in past. "The suspect seems to have a network, or at least supporters," Williams explained. "Each of these files represents someone who's either eluded capture or was connected to someone you put behind bars." Daniels felt a chill creep up his spine. His cases had crossed paths with countless criminals, but the thought of a network, people united by a shared grudge, sent a wave of unease through him. As they continued reviewing the files, Daniels noticed something even more unsettling. 2 recent cases had been flagged as unsolved, despite having once been closed with convictions. The convictions had been overturned in the last few weeks due to new evidence that had surfaced, leading to the suspect's release. The pattern suggested intentional manipulation, perhaps even a deliberate attempt to undermine his work. "This goes deeper than one man in a Santa suit," Daniels murmured, his fingers tracing the edge of the most recent file. "It's coordinated." Williams nodded, his expression dark. "Which means we need to be ready. The department has your back, Daniels, but with the public on edge, and this guy's words fresh in everyone's minds, we have to tread carefully." Daniels sensed an underlying message in Williams's words, one that hinted at the political pressures mounting over the case. There were concerns about the backlash, about making too many waves during the holiday season when the city's image was at stake. Later that day, as Daniels reviewed the latest security reports, an officer he trusted pulled him aside, his tone hushed. "Daniels, be careful who you trust around here. Word is, someone's been leaking intel. Every move you made last night was somehow anticipated." Daniels felt a surge of anger, quickly tempered by a sharp sense of betrayal. A leak within the department meant that someone close to him, someone he'd worked alongside, might be feeding information to those who meant harm. He clenched his fists, vowing silently to find whoever was responsible. The night's events had been orchestrated to tear at his resolve, but he wouldn't let them break his spirit. Not while there were people depending on him. The following evening, Daniels was back at the Christmas market, his gaze sweeping over the familiar stalls and decorations that now held a sinister undertone. The cheerful lights and festive music clashed with the unease simmering in his chest. The department had reopened the market, insisting it was safe after the previous night's events, but Daniels knew better. The threat was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. Mira stood by his side, her face thoughtful as she took in the bustling scene. After everything she had experienced, she was more observant, her eyes darting around as if searching for anything out of place. "Do you think he'll try something again?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the crowd's chatter. Daniels hesitated before answering. "I don't know, but we're going to stay vigilant, just in case." As they moved through the market, Daniels couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow felt heavier, every passerby a potential threat. He kept Mira close, aware that she had proven to be a keen observer the previous night. Her insights had been invaluable, and her bravery continued to impress him. Suddenly, his radio crackled, breaking his thoughts. "Daniels, we've received a call, an anonymous tip about another package, this time near the north entrance." His stomach clenched. Despite their efforts, the game wasn't over. He signaled for the nearby officers to begin evacuating the area around the north entrance, keeping Mira within sight as he made his way there. The crowd was thinner tonight, but enough people lingered that clearing the area took time. As he arrived at the north entrance, Daniel spotted it immediately, a small gift box, neatly wrapped in festive paper, sitting just a few feet from a food cart. The sight of it made his pulse quicken. It was identical to the packages from the night before, with the same precise red ribbon tied in a perfect bow. He gestured for the bomb squad, who moved in with practiced efficiency. Mira watched quietly, her expression mirroring his concern as the officers secured the area. She clutched her bear tightly, her gaze fixed on the package. Moments later, one of the bomb squad members gave the all-clear. The box had been another decoy, packed only with harmless holiday items. But Daniels knew that this was no mistake. The suspect was testing them, probing their weaknesses, watching how they responded. Daniels exhaled, tension still thick in his chest. "He's taunting us. Every move he makes, he wants us to know he's one step ahead." Mira looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Then we have to be one step ahead of him." Daniels managed a faint smile, admiring her resolve. She was right. This wasn't just about reacting. It was about anticipating the next move, understanding the suspect's twisted logic. And as the night wore on, he realized they had one last chance to outmaneuver him, to end this game before the holiday season came to a close. They stayed near the market, watching, waiting, each hour heightening the tension as they prepared for the suspect's final play. And as the clock ticked down toward midnight, Daniels's resolve hardened. The next time the suspect made a move, he would be ready. Midnight drew closer, and the Christmas market had thinned to only a handful of people, the vendors closing up shop for the night. The festive lights sparkled faintly against the cold, starless sky, casting a surreal glow over the emptying square. Daniels and Mira stood near the base of a massive Christmas tree, their eyes scanning the quiet market, waiting. Daniels had briefed the remaining officers, instructing them to watch for anything unusual. Despite the sense of calm, his instincts told him the suspect's final play was coming. He felt the weight of Myra's small hand clutching his, her presence grounding him as he stayed vigilant. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows on the far side of the square. Daniel's heart pounded as he recognized a red coat and white beard. It was the same man, the Twisted Santa, back for one last confrontation. Daniel stepped forward, signaling for the nearby officers to hang back, knowing this was something he needed to face himself. The man's mouth curled into a dark grin as he approached. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all night. "Officer Daniels," the man drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "I hoped you'd still be here. It wouldn't be the same without you." Daniels held his ground, his voice steady but edged with determination. "Whatever game you're playing, it's over. You're coming with me." The man chuckled, a hollow sound that echoed through the empty square. "Oh, you think you've won, don't you? But this night isn't over yet." He raised his hand, revealing a small device with a blinking red light. Daniel's pulse spiked. The suspect had one last trick, one final device set to unleash havoc. His gaze flickered to Mira, who stood frozen in shock, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of the man and the device in his hand. "Back away, Mira," he murmured, his tone firm but calm. She obeyed, moving behind him, but staying close, her face taut with concern. The man smirked, his thumb hovering over the button. "Imagine the joy this market will bring when it all goes up in flames," he sneered. A grand finale. Daniels felt the weight of the situation settle over him. This man was willing to destroy everything, to sacrifice himself and anyone nearby for the sake of causing chaos. But Daniels wasn't about to let that happen. Keeping his gaze fixed on the man, Daniels took a careful step forward, his voice low. "You don't have to do this. It doesn't have to end like this." The man's smirk faded, replaced by a flash of anger. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not like you. I don't have anything left to lose." Daniels saw his opening, recognizing the brief moment of distraction. He lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it, forcing the device from his hand. The man struggled, his face contorted in rage as he tried to wrestle free. But Daniels held firm, his grip unyielding. The device clattered to the ground, and Mira dashed forward, picking it up and tossing it to the nearest officer, who quickly secured it. The man let out a frustrated roar, thrashing in Daniel's hold, but the officers moved in, helping restrain him as he continued to fight. Daniels felt a surge of relief wash over him as the suspect was finally subdued, his last attempt at chaos thwarted. He looked over at Mira, who was watching him with a mixture of awe and pride. "You did great, Mira," he said, his voice warm with gratitude. She smiled, her eyes shining with relief. "We did it together." Daniels nodded, feeling the weight of the night lift as they watched the officers lead the man away. The market was quiet again, the threat neutralized, and for the first time all night, Daniels allowed himself to breathe freely. With the suspect in custody, Daniels and Mira took a moment to absorb the gravity of what they'd been through. The square was nearly empty now, the market closed, its festive lights still twinkling in silent triumph over the darkness that had threatened it. Daniels glanced down at Mira, who was looking up at the towering Christmas tree with a bittersweet expression. The night had changed her. He could see it in her eyes, the way she held herself, a hint of maturity that hadn't been there before. She had faced danger, had shown bravery, and resolve beyond her years, and Daniels couldn't help but feel a sense of pride mixed with sadness. "You know, Mira," he said softly, "what you did tonight, helping me, staying brave, it made all the difference." She gave him a small smile, though her eyes were filled with a wisdom that went beyond her age. "I didn't want anyone else to get hurt, and I didn't want you to be alone." Her words touched him deeply, a reminder of the importance of connection, of standing together in the face of darkness. He felt a surge of gratitude for her companionship, for the way she had given him strength when he needed it most. As they stood together in the quiet square, a familiar voice called out from behind them. Sergeant Williams approached, his expression one of respect and relief. "Daniels," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You handled tonight with honor. We couldn't have asked for better." Daniels nodded, though the weight of the night's events still lingered. "I couldn't have done it without Mira," he replied, glancing down at her with a smile. Williams smiled, too, nodding at her in acknowledgement. "You've got a good partner there, brave and sharp. We need more people like her." Mira blushed, looking away, but there was a quiet pride in her eyes. Daniels squeezed her shoulder gently, sharing a moment of silent gratitude before turning back to Williams. As they walked away from the market, the festive lights faded into the background, leaving behind a sense of calm and closure. Daniels knew the city would sleep safely tonight, that Mira could return to her family knowing she had played a vital role in protecting it. But he also understood that sacrifices had been made, the innocence of the holiday season tarnished by the night's events. Yet, in that sacrifice, he found a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder of why he had taken this path. Walking Mira home, Daniels felt a peace he hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet understanding that even in the face of darkness, light could prevail. He would carry this night with him, the memory of Myra's courage and their shared victory, a reminder that together they could face whatever came next. The first rays of Christmas morning filtered through the city, casting a soft glow over the streets and giving the lingering holiday decorations a renewed sense of warmth and peace. Daniels hadn't slept. The events of the previous night still echoed in his mind. But there was something else, a quiet satisfaction and a deep appreciation for the people he'd fought to protect. After a few hours of rest, Daniels made his way back to the market, hoping to see it once more before the day grew busy. The area was peaceful now, a stark contrast to the tension that had filled it just hours before. The vendors were setting up again, their smiles returning as they greeted early morning visitors. The tree sparkled in the daylight, a symbol of resilience against the shadows that had threatened it. As Daniels approached the market square, he spotted a familiar figure standing near the tree. Mira was there, bundled in a coat, her expression one of quiet contemplation. She noticed him and waved, her face lighting up with a smile. "Good morning, Officer Daniels," she greeted, her voice soft yet cheerful. "Morning, Mira," he replied, smiling back. "You couldn't stay away either, huh?" She shook her head, glancing up at the tree. "I just wanted to see it in the morning. It feels different now, safer." Daniels nodded, feeling the same sense of peace. The market was theirs again, the spirit of the season reclaiming the space from the fear and chaos of the night before. They stood in comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. Then Mira turned to him, her face thoughtful. "Thank you for keeping everyone safe. I know it wasn't easy." He met her gaze, gratitude filling his expression. "Thank you, Mira. I couldn't have done it without you. You were brave, and you helped more than you know." Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked away, a shy smile tugging at her lips. It just felt like the right thing to do. Daniels felt a swell of pride. She reminded him of why he joined the force, of the values that had guided him all these years. She was a symbol of the resilience he'd been trying to protect, and seeing her embrace that courage renewed his own resolve. They spent a few more moments by the tree, watching as families began to gather, the laughter and joy filling the air once again. It was a reminder that, no matter the darkness they'd faced, the city had emerged stronger, its spirit undimmed. Later that day, Daniels walked Mira back to her family's home, the familiar streets filled with the cheerful sounds of holiday celebrations. The neighborhood was alive with carolers, children playing in the snow, and families gathering around their decorated homes. It felt like a new beginning, a fresh chapter for the city, one where the events of the night before would be remembered not with fear, but with a renewed sense of hope. Myra's family welcomed them warmly, her mother offering Daniels a heartfelt thanks and a warm drink. As he stood with them, sharing in the small moments of holiday joy, he felt a deep connection, a reminder that his work was not just about duty, but about community. Before he left, Mira handed him a small package, wrapped in red paper with a simple ribbon. "For you," she said, smiling shyly. "Just a thank you." Daniels opened the package, finding a handmade ornament inside, a small wooden figure carved with care. It was simple but meaningful, a reminder of their shared journey. He felt his heart warm as he thanked her, the gesture a symbol of the bond they'd formed over the last 2 nights. As he stepped out into the snow, he took a deep breath, the chill invigorating, clearing away the final traces of the night's tension. The city felt new, filled with a renewed sense of peace that extended beyond the holiday season. And as he walked, he felt the weight of his work lift, replaced by a quiet sense of fulfillment. He would carry the memories of his Christmas with him, a reminder that even in the face of danger, there was courage, kindness, and a community that would always stand together. And as the snow fell softly around him, Officer Daniels knew he had found something even greater than victory. He had found hope. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support our work. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know in comments which part of the story had the biggest impact on you. Your thoughts mean a lot to us. And if you have any ideas or themes you'd like to see in future stories, drop them below. Your suggestions help us bring more of what you love to the channel. Thanks for being part of our community, and stay tuned for more exciting tales.